Why did this city's own police force once drop a bomb on its own residents and then investigate a mascot for assault? In the same city where the Founding Fathers nailed the windows shut just to keep America's biggest secret. Welcome to 71 Dumbest Things About Philadelphia that explain everything, where history gets weirder than fiction. Cheesesteak counters that'll humiliate you for ordering wrong, a 23-year curse blamed on a single skyscraper, and the myth you still believe about who really sewed the first flag. By the end, you won't trust a single thing you thought you knew about this city. So hit subscribe before we start. 1. Veterans Stadium. In December of 1968 was a mess, as the Eagles limped through a 2-win season and the crowd sat furious before halftime arrived. Management brought out a teenager dressed as Santa Claus to lift spirits during a break. Instead, thousands of grown adults decided a chubby kid in a red suit deserved their rage. Snowballs rained down first, then beer cans, then hoagies flew through the freezing air toward Santa. He ducked and sprinted off like he was fleeing a mob. The moment became legendary, branding Philadelphia fans as America's only crowd willing to boo Christmas itself. 2. Philadelphia in the sweltering summer of 1787 turned into a pressure cooker as delegates argued inside a stuffy room over the future of an entire country. To keep their heated debates secret from spies, neighbors, and newspapers, they made a wild decision. They nailed the windows shut, sealing themselves inside with no airflow for months. Men in thick wool coats and powdered wigs sweated through arguments about government while suffocating in a meeting room. Flies buzzed, tempers flared, and nobody dared crack a window for air. Somehow, through stubborn secrecy and heat, these founders hammered out the United States Constitution. 3. Philadelphia was branded corrupt and contented by a 19th-century journalist who could not believe what he saw at the ballot box. Machine politicians openly stole money, bought votes with beer, and handed out city jobs like candy. Voters knew exactly what was happening, yet re-elected these same crooks year after year without blinking. Newspapers exposed bribery and kickbacks constantly, yet nothing ever changed at the polls. The nickname stuck because it captured something painfully true about the city and its own corruption. Philadelphia did not just tolerate dirty politics, it practically welcomed it back every single election. 4. Eastern State Penitentiary opened with a radical idea that inmates should sit in complete isolation and reflect on crimes in total silence. Guards forced every prisoner to wear a heavy hood whenever they left their cell so they could never see another human face. Men lived for years hearing footsteps but never once looking another inmate in the eye. The isolation was meant to inspire penitence, which is where the word penitentiary comes from. Instead, prisoners began hallucinating and talking to walls, losing their grip on reality inside the stone hallways. The experiment meant to reform men instead broke their minds. 5. Philadelphia once enforced an old blue law that banned something as harmless as buying ice cream on a Sunday afternoon. City officials believed Sunday should stay free of commerce, so shops selling sweets faced fines or shutdowns if caught. Kids begging their parents for a scoop on a hot Sunday were simply out of luck under the rule. Shop owners grumbled while watching potential customers walk right past their locked doors. Enforcement varied wildly depending on which cop was patrolling that particular weekend. The law eventually faded away, but generations of Philadelphians learned that even dessert could threaten public morality. 6. Until 1987, an unwritten gentleman's agreement kept every building in Philadelphia shorter than the William Penn statue perched atop City Hall. Developers respected this quiet rule for decades, treating Penn's bronze hat as a sacred ceiling nobody dared cross. Locals joked that breaking the rule would curse the city's sports teams, which some still blame for decades of championship droughts. When One Liberty Place finally rose higher than Penn in 1987, old-timers shook their heads in genuine worry. Sports fans watched team after team fall short in the years after and pointed straight to that broken skyline agreement. 7. ENIAC hummed to life as the world's first general-purpose electronic computer, weighing 30 tons and filling an entire room. 6 brilliant women handled the real work programming this beast by physically rewiring cables and flipping switches for every new calculation. There was no keyboard or screen, just miles of wiring that had to be reconfigured each time the machine tackled a new problem. These women became invisible pioneers of computer science despite doing work that would define an entire industry. Visitors gawked at flashing lights, assuming some genius man was secretly running the show behind the scenes. 8. A hot dog cart vendor near a shipyard got bored one day and decided to grill up beef instead of his usual hot dogs. A cab driver wandered over, smelled something incredible, and demanded a taste of whatever was sizzling on that griddle. The vendor tossed the beef onto a roll, creating something entirely new. On the spot, without even trying, word spread fast among hungry workers who started requesting the same beef sandwich instead of the usual hot dog. Someone eventually added cheese, and Philadelphia had accidentally invented one of America's most beloved sandwiches through pure improvisation and luck. 9. Yellow fever tore through Philadelphia in 1793, killing roughly 1 out of every 10 residents in a single brutal summer. Bodies piled up faster than gravediggers could bury them, while terrified families fled the city in droves. The disease spread so fast and killed so mercilessly that the sitting federal government packed up and abandoned the capital entirely. President Washington and his cabinet scattered to the countryside, leaving Philadelphia to fend for itself during the worst of the outbreak. Doctors argued furiously over cures, while desperate treatments like bloodletting often made dying patients even worse than before. 10. Philadelphia International Airport once ran an actual wedding chapel right inside the terminal for travelers who wanted to marry between flights. Couples in a rush or just feeling spontaneous could tie the knot without ever leaving the building or missing their connection. Some grooms reportedly still had carry-on bags slung over their shoulders while saying vows at the altar. Airport staff occasionally served as witnesses for couples who showed up without family or friends nearby. Confused travelers would wander past mid-ceremony, wondering if they had stumbled into a movie set instead of a gate. 11. Veterans Stadium fan chaos got so bad that in 1997 the city installed an actual courtroom and jail cell inside the stadium basement itself. Judge Seamus McCaffrey presided over a mini court system, arraigning drunk and violent fans within hours of their arrest. Fans who threw batteries, started fights, or flashed the field could be fined and processed before the game even ended. Sports networks nationwide mocked Philadelphia for needing its own dedicated jail just to survive a football Sunday. The setup became a strange point of local pride, proving Philly fans were rowdy enough to require actual law enforcement infrastructure. 12. The Declaration of Independence gets celebrated every July 4th, yet most delegates never actually signed it on that famous date. The document was approved and printed on July 4th, but the physical signing ceremony happened nearly a month later. On August 2nd, delegates finally lined up to add their names, making the whole affair much less dramatic than legend suggests. Some signers were not even present in Philadelphia back on July 4th at all. Generations of Americans grew up believing quill pens flew across parchment on Independence Day itself, when reality moved at a much slower, bureaucratic pace. 13. Mayor Frank Rizzo built a reputation as one of the bluntest and most controversial politicians Philadelphia ever produced during his time in office. During a campaign trail moment, he made a shockingly crude comment about his own re-election that instantly made national headlines. Reporters were stunned that a sitting mayor would speak so bluntly without any filter or political caution whatsoever. Supporters loved his tough guy honesty, while critics called it proof he had zero business holding public office. The comment followed him for years, becoming a defining example of just how unfiltered Philadelphia politics could actually get. 14. Pennsylvania once banned car dealerships from selling vehicles on Sundays under an old blue law nobody could quite explain anymore. Eager buyers who wanted to drive off the lot on their day off were simply told to come back Monday instead. Dealerships lost an entire day of potential sales every single week for decades because of the outdated religious rule. Salesmen grumbled while watching customers browse the lot on Sunday, only to walk away empty-handed until the following day. The ban finally faded, but not before generations of Pennsylvanians learned that buying a car could apparently offend God on a Sunday. 15. Ben Franklin flew his famous kite during a thunderstorm, proving lightning was electricity in one of history's most reckless science experiments. What most people never learn is that scientists trying to copy his exact experiment in other cities were actually electrocuted to death. Georg Wilhelm Richmann in Russia attempted a similar setup and was struck dead almost instantly in front of witnesses. Franklin somehow walked away completely fine, while imitators across the world paid with their lives for the same curiosity. His casual brush with death became legend, while the copycats who died trying became a chilling historical footnote. 16. Philadelphia cheesesteak counters became notorious for demanding customers. Order using a very specific shorthand or risk public humiliation on the spot. Tourists who politely asked for onions and cheese instead of using proper lingo got mocked loudly in front of the entire line. Locals barked orders in seconds flat while confused visitors fumbled and held up the whole operation behind them. Workers behind the counter had zero patience for hesitation, treating the ordering process like a timed sport with real consequences. Getting your cheesesteak order wrong in Philadelphia could apparently turn a simple lunch into a public shaming spectacle nobody forgot. 17. George Washington served as president while living inside a Philadelphia mansion that also functioned as the nation's temporary Capitol building. Behind the scenes, several enslaved people worked inside that very mansion, keeping the presidential household running smoothly every single day. Washington rotated these enslaved workers back to Virginia periodically to dodge a Pennsylvania law that could have granted them freedom after 6 months. The man leading a new nation built on liberty was actively working around abolition laws just steps from Independence Hall. This uncomfortable truth sat quietly behind the polished image of America's first president for generations. 18. The iconic Rocky statue standing outside the Art Museum actually started as nothing more than a leftover prop from a movie set. Sylvester Stallone commissioned it for Rocky III, then left it behind once filming wrapped up in Philadelphia. City officials suddenly found themselves arguing furiously over whether a boxing movie prop deserved a permanent spot outside a serious art institution. Some called it tacky commercialism, while others insisted Rocky had become a genuine symbol of the city's fighting spirit. After years of back and forth, the statue stayed for good, turning a discarded prop into a beloved tourist landmark. 19. One chaotic Eagles game in 1997 spiraled into roughly 60 separate stand fights breaking out across the stadium within a single afternoon. Security guards ran from section to section trying to break up brawls while beer cups and insults flew through freezing air. Somewhere in the middle of the madness, a fan actually fired an emergency flare gun straight across the stadium stands. Players on the field could reportedly see the chaos unfolding in the crowd while trying to focus on the actual game. The flare gun incident became legendary proof that Philadelphia fans would bring literal fireworks to settle a Sunday argument. 20. Betsy Ross supposedly sewed the first American flag after a secret meeting with George Washington himself inside her small Philadelphia home. The problem is absolutely no evidence from her actual lifetime supports any part of that beloved patriotic story. The tale was invented nearly a century later by her own grandson, who told it during a family history presentation. Historians have found no letters, receipts, or records connecting Betsy Ross to the flag's actual creation whatsoever. Despite the shaky origins, millions of Americans still visit her house every year believing they are standing in flag-making history itself. 21. Dozens of Philadelphia City Council members and judges got swept up in a single massive FBI corruption sting during the 1970s and 80s. Agents ran a fake company offering bribes to local officials who accepted cash-stuffed envelopes without a second thought. Wiretaps captured politicians casually discussing kickbacks like it was just another Tuesday at the office. When indictments finally dropped, entire chunks of city government got hauled into court at once. Newspapers had a field day printing photo after photo of officials in handcuffs. Philadelphia earned a reputation where getting caught taking bribes felt less like scandal and more like an occupational hazard. 22. For decades, Pennsylvania residents could not simply walk into a grocery store and grab a cold six-pack like normal Americans. State law forced beer buyers to visit either a bar or a dedicated beer distributor instead of a regular shop. Thirsty shoppers doing their weekly groceries would leave completely empty-handed on the beer aisle every single time. Out-of-state visitors found the rule baffling and often hilarious once they realized how complicated buying beer actually was. Distributors sometimes required buying an entire case instead of letting customers grab just a few bottles. The confusing patchwork system became a running joke among residents who just wanted a six-pack with dinner. 23. Philadelphia's original public hospital opened in 1751 with genuinely good intentions of treating the sick and mentally ill of the city. Standard treatment for psychiatric patients back then unfortunately involved chaining people to walls in a dark, damp basement. Visitors sometimes paid admission just to gawk at chained patients like some kind of grim public attraction. Doctors believed harsh restraint and isolation would somehow calm troubled minds instead of making things worse. Patients screamed and struggled against chains for years, while medical staff called it standard care. The hospital eventually reformed its methods, but not before generations suffered under practices considered horrifying by modern standards. 24. Tourists sprinting up the art museum steps while pumping their fists became such a massive phenomenon that the museum now manages actual crowd control for it. Visitors from every corner of the world show up specifically to recreate Rocky Balboa's iconic training montage from the original film. Museum staff watch daily as strangers in workout gear or full costumes race to the top for photos. Some tourists arrive before sunrise just to get a clear shot without hundreds of other fans crowding the frame. A bronze statue of Rocky sits nearby, making the whole scene feel like a shrine to a fictional boxer. What started as one movie scene turned into a permanent, unofficial museum exhibit nobody planned for. 25. Phillies fans turned on prospect J.D. Drew. Before he ever played a single game for the team, he refused to sign with. Drew held out for more money after being drafted, leading fans to boo him relentlessly whenever his name came up. Years later, when Drew returned to Philadelphia as an opposing player, the crowd erupted into thunderous jeering every single at-bat. One furious fan reportedly threw a battery that struck him during a game amid the ongoing hostility. The incident became infamous nationwide as proof Philadelphia sports fans held grudges longer than almost anyone else in the country. Drew's name still gets booed decades later purely out of tradition. 26. Ben Franklin once wrote a private letter mocking the decision to make the bald eagle America's national symbol instead of something more respectable. He argued the eagle was a lazy bird of bad moral character that stole food from other animals rather than hunting honestly. Franklin suggested the humble turkey would have made a far better representative of true American values and work ethic. Critics at the time laughed off the suggestion, assuming Franklin was simply joking around in his usual playful tone. The letter resurfaced centuries later, becoming one of the most quoted pieces of trivia about America's founding symbols. Turkey Day almost became a very different kind of national statement. 27. Philadelphia's political corruption became so routine that local reporters actually kept a running public scoreboard tracking indicted officials over the years. Newspapers printed updated tallies the same way sports pages tracked wins and losses for the local teams. Readers checked the corruption count almost as regularly as they checked the Eagles or Phillies standings each week. Officials joked darkly about who might be next to join the growing list of indicted names. The scoreboard became a strange point of dark humor, rather than genuine public outrage among longtime residents. Corruption had become so normalized that Philadelphia treated it like just another local pastime. 28. Pennsylvania kept state-run liquor stores as the only legal place to buy wine and spirits for nearly a full century straight. The system started as a leftover holdover from Prohibition, when the state wanted tight control over alcohol sales statewide. Shoppers looking for a bottle of wine had to visit a specific government-run store instead of a regular grocery aisle. Selection often felt limited, and prices frustrated residents who watched neighboring states offer far more convenient options. Out-of-state visitors found the whole system bizarre once they realized how tightly Pennsylvania controlled something as simple as wine. The state finally loosened restrictions decades later after immense public pressure. 29. Philadelphia City Hall took more than 30 years to fully construct, becoming one of the most delayed government buildings in American history. Once finally completed, it briefly held the title of tallest habitable building anywhere in the entire world. Construction crews battled funding issues, design changes, and endless bureaucratic delays throughout the painfully slow building process. Workers hauled massive stone blocks by hand, long before modern construction equipment made such projects dramatically faster. Despite the decades-long wait, the finished building became an architectural marvel admired well beyond Philadelphia's own borders. City Hall stands today as proof that Philadelphia does things on its own very stubborn timeline. 30. Philadelphia's beloved Mummers Parade traces its wild roots back to rowdy colonial-era residents who fired guns straight into the air to ring in the new year. Neighbors dressed in costumes wandered door to door demanding food and drink, while making as much noise as humanly possible. What started as chaotic random celebration eventually evolved into an organized parade with elaborate costumes and string bands. Early participants had zero interest in polite tradition, preferring gunfire laughter and general mayhem instead. City officials eventually stepped in to formalize the event, hoping to tame the rowdiest parts of the celebration. Even today, the parade keeps a rebellious spirit rooted in its unruly gunpowder-soaked origins. 31. City officials in Philadelphia refused to cancel a massive 200,000-person war bonds parade in 1918, even as warnings about a deadly flu spread across the country. Health experts begged organizers to call it off, knowing large crowds could accelerate the outbreak already creeping through military camps. Officials pushed forward anyway, worried about morale and war funding more than public health. Within days of the parade, Philadelphia hospitals were overwhelmed with sick and dying residents by the thousands. The flu ripped through the city faster and harder than almost anywhere else in America. That single stubborn parade became one of the deadliest public health decisions in the city's entire history. 32. The Mutter Museum in Philadelphia fills its shelves with real human specimens that make even seasoned visitors stop and stare in disbelief. Conjoined twin skeletons sit preserved behind glass, alongside tumors, organs, and skulls, collected over more than a century of medical history. One of the strangest exhibits features a corpse that naturally transformed into a soap-like substance called adipocere. Medical students once used the collection purely for education, before curious tourists started flooding in for the shock value instead. Visitors leave equal parts fascinated and horrified after wandering through rooms packed with genuine human remains. The museum remains one of the strangest and most talked about attractions in the entire city. 33. Sportscaster Howard Cosell watched the infamous Santa booing incident unfold from the broadcast booth and could not believe what he was witnessing live. He described the chaos to a national audience, turning one embarrassing local moment into permanent nationwide infamy for Philadelphia fans. Viewers across the country tuned in expecting football highlights, and instead got a story about grown adults attacking a teenager dressed as Santa. Cosell's commentary cemented the moment in sports history, far beyond what local newspapers alone could have achieved. Philadelphia fans became the punchline of talk shows and sports segments for years following the broadcast. One bad afternoon turned into a permanent national reputation, thanks entirely to Cosell's microphone. 34. In 1985, Philadelphia police made the almost unthinkable decision to drop an actual bomb from a helicopter onto a residential city block. The target was a row house occupied by members of the group Move during a tense standoff with authorities. The bomb ignited a massive fire that city officials controversially chose to let burn rather than immediately intervene. Flames spread rapidly, destroying 61 homes and killing 11 people, including several children inside the targeted house. Entire families watched their neighborhood turn to ash within hours because of a decision made by their own city government. The tragedy remains one of the most shocking uses of force by police anywhere in American history. 35. Rumors spread for decades claiming the Navy secretly teleported an entire ship invisible out of Philadelphia's harbor sometime during 1943. Believers insisted sailors emerged from the experiment, disoriented, traumatized, and even partially fused into the ship's metal hull. Government records show absolutely zero evidence supporting any part of this bizarre wartime experiment ever actually happening. Despite the total lack of proof, the story known as the Philadelphia experiment refuses to disappear from conspiracy circles online. Books, documentaries, and countless internet forums keep the myth alive. generation after generation, regardless of the facts. Philadelphia's harbor apparently inspired one of America's most persistent and thoroughly debunked conspiracy theories ever recorded. 36. SEPTA. Philadelphia's public transit system somehow kept running well into the modern smartphone era without accepting basic credit or debit cards on buses. Riders without exact cash or tokens were simply out of luck no matter how urgently they needed to get somewhere in the city. Frustrated commuters watched buses pull away while fumbling for spare change that never quite added up correctly. Other major American cities modernized their payment systems years earlier, leaving Philadelphia looking stuck firmly in the past. Tourists visiting from cities with tap-to-pay transit found the outdated system genuinely baffling and inconvenient. SEPTA finally caught up well into the 2000s long after most riders had given up expecting real change. 37. William Penn originally designed Philadelphia's 1682 city grid around 5 spacious public squares meant to prevent the overcrowding common in European cities. His careful vision imagined wide-open green spaces giving residents plenty of breathing room as the population grew over time. Developers and early residents largely ignored this thoughtful plan almost immediately once actual construction began across the city. Buildings crammed tightly together anyway, completely defeating the spacious intention behind Penn's original careful blueprint. Alleys and cramped row houses spread rapidly, turning the planned open city into something far more chaotic and dense. Penn's peaceful vision of breathing room lost the fight against Philadelphia's need to build fast and cheap. 38. The Philadelphia Zoo proudly holds the title of America's very first zoo, but its opening got delayed for an unusually long stretch of time. The zoo received its official charter back in 1859, with excited plans to open its gates to curious visitors soon after. Those plans got completely derailed once the Civil War erupted, consuming national attention, money, and resources for years straight. Construction sat frozen while the country fought through one of its bloodiest conflicts instead of building animal enclosures. The zoo finally opened its doors a full 15 years after receiving its original charter approval. Even America's very first zoo could not escape getting swallowed up by the chaos of war. 39. Philadelphia's beloved Mummers Parade carried a deeply uncomfortable tradition for generations that many participants performed while wearing blackface as part of their costumes. City officials and parade organizers allowed this practice to continue largely unquestioned for decades, despite growing criticism from residents. The tradition persisted through countless parades before the city finally stepped in to formally ban the practice in 1964. Even after the official ban, some participants resisted the change, clinging stubbornly to old parade customs. Civil rights advocates had pushed hard for years, demanding the change long before officials finally took real action. The parade's colorful reputation carries this darker chapter as part of its complicated, tangled history. 40. Reading Terminal Market stands today as one of America's oldest continuously running public markets, housed inside a train shed built way back in 1893. Vendors originally set up shop beneath the bustling train station, selling fresh produce meats and baked goods to daily commuters rushing past. Trains eventually stopped running through the terminal, but the market itself refused to disappear along with the railway. Generations of vendor families kept their stalls running, passing recipes and businesses down through decades of change around them. Visitors today wander the same aisles where shoppers haggled over prices more than a century earlier. The trains left long ago, but the market's original heartbeat never actually stopped ticking. 41. Philadelphia police formally opened an investigation into Flyers mascot Gritty within months of his 2018 debut after allegations he punched a young fan. The bizarre orange mascot had already gone viral worldwide for his chaotic, unpredictable energy long before the investigation even began. News outlets nationwide found it genuinely hilarious that a professional sports mascot required an actual police inquiry. Fans rallied around Gritty anyway, treating the controversy as further proof of his beloved unhinged personality. The investigation eventually closed without any charges, but the story became permanent internet legend regardless. Philadelphia somehow turned a googly-eyed mascot into one of its most talked-about modern folk heroes. 42. Independence Hall carries a reputation as a sacred birthplace of American democracy, despite never being purpose-built for that historic role at all. The building started life as the ordinary Pennsylvania State House, handling routine colonial government business long before anything monumental happened inside. Delegates simply used the space because it was available, not because anyone planned for it to host history. The Declaration of Independence and later the Constitution both got hammered out inside this unassuming government office building. Tourists today walk through expecting grand purpose-built architecture and instead find a practical colonial workspace. Philadelphia's most sacred landmark started as nothing more than paperwork central for Pennsylvania officials. 43. Mysterious tiled messages referencing resurrecting the dead on the planet Jupiter began mysteriously appearing embedded directly into Philadelphia's streets sometime during the 1980s. Pedestrians walking downtown would suddenly notice strange cryptic text staring up at them from beneath their own feet. Nobody ever confirmed who created the tiles or how they managed to install them without anyone noticing the process. Theories ranged from lone eccentric artists to elaborate secret societies leaving behind coded messages for future generations. The tiles kept appearing in new locations over the years, only deepening the citywide mystery surrounding their origin. Decades later, Philadelphia's sidewalk mystery remains completely unsolved and stranger with every passing year. 44. Pennsylvania enforced a strict ban on Sunday hunting for well over a century, rooted in old colonial era. Blue laws nobody fully remembered the reasoning behind. Hunters eager to head into the woods on their one free weekend day found themselves legally blocked from doing so. Neighboring states allowed Sunday hunting freely, making Pennsylvania's rule feel increasingly outdated and frustrating to local outdoorsmen. Lawmakers debated lifting the ban for years, while hunting advocates pushed hard against stubborn, old-fashioned resistance. The rule finally got fully lifted statewide, all the way in 2019, shocking absolutely no one that it took this long. Pennsylvania hunters waited literal centuries just to legally hunt on a Sunday. 45. Elfreth's Alley holds the impressive title of the oldest continuously inhabited residential street anywhere in the entire United States of America. The narrow colonial-era alley has housed residents nonstop since the early 1700s, making it a living piece of American history. Modern cars simply cannot fit down the tiny alley, which stayed too narrow to ever get widened for traffic. Residents today still live inside centuries-old homes lining the same cobblestone path walked by colonial workers long ago. Tourists squeeze through the cramped alley, snapping photos while actual homeowners try to go about their daily normal lives. Elfreth's Alley proves Philadelphia's oldest street simply refused to modernize alongside the rest of the city. 46. Early Philadelphia doctors reportedly turned some of the country's first public autopsies into full-blown ticketed spectator events for curious paying audiences. Crowds gathered inside packed lecture halls watching surgeons cut open cadavers while narrating each anatomical discovery out loud. Tickets sold briskly since public entertainment options remained fairly limited in colonial and early American Philadelphia. Medical students took genuine educational notes, while regular curious townsfolk simply came for the shocking spectacle of it all. Doctors treated the practice as legitimate science, while critics questioned the ethics of turning death into public entertainment. Philadelphia essentially invented dinner theater, using actual human corpses as the featured performance. 47. Philadelphia's deep soft pretzel obsession traces directly back to German immigrant baking traditions that arrived in the city as early as the 1700s. These immigrants brought recipes and techniques for the twisted, salty dough that Philadelphia would eventually claim as its own signature snack. Street vendors began selling warm pretzels on nearly every corner, turning the German import into a distinctly local Philadelphia staple. Generations of residents grew up grabbing pretzels from carts, the same way other cities grabbed hot dogs or bagels. The tradition stuck so hard that Philadelphia now consumes more soft pretzels per person than almost anywhere else in America. A German baking tradition quietly became one of Philadelphia's proudest and most stubborn food identities. 48. A mysterious illness struck attendees of a 1976 American Legion convention, held inside a Philadelphia hotel, killing 34 people within just weeks. Doctors scrambled desperately trying to identify the mystery disease while panic spread through the convention attendees and their worried families. Scientists eventually traced the outbreak to a previously unknown bacterium spreading through the hotel's contaminated air conditioning system. Researchers named the newly discovered bacteria after the very event where it first killed unsuspecting convention-goers. The outbreak fundamentally changed how buildings across the country designed and maintained their ventilation systems going forward. One deadly Philadelphia hotel convention accidentally taught modern science an entirely new disease. 49. Boathouse Row's iconic string of lights along the Schuylkill River started as a simple practical fix, so rowers could see their clubhouses returning after dark. Someone strung basic light bulbs along the building outlines purely for function, rather than any grand decorative ambition whatsoever. Rowers appreciated finally being able to navigate safely back to their clubs without stumbling around in total darkness. Over time, residents and visitors began noticing how genuinely beautiful the illuminated row looked reflected across the river at night. What started as pure practical necessity slowly transformed into one of Philadelphia's most photographed nightly attractions. A simple safety fix for rowers accidentally became a permanent glowing postcard for the entire city. 50. The Phillies found themselves in a costly legal battle in 2019, forcing them to pay nearly $4 million just to keep using their own beloved mascot. The original creators of the Philly Fanatic had structured the mascot's rights in a way that gave them serious leverage decades later. Lawyers argued back and forth over contracts signed long before anyone imagined the Fanatic becoming a beloved franchise icon. Fans watched nervously, worried their favorite green mascot might actually disappear entirely over the messy copyright dispute. The team ultimately paid up rather than risk losing decades of goofy, beloved mascot history overnight. Keeping a giant green fuzzy mascot turned out to be an unexpectedly expensive legal headache. 51. Eastern State Penitentiary's radical isolation design became so influential that over 300 prisons worldwide eventually copied its exact architectural blueprint. Officials from other countries traveled to Philadelphia specifically to study the layout, hoping to replicate its supposedly reformative results. The wheel-shaped design with individual cells radiating outward seemed revolutionary to prison architects everywhere at the time. Decades later, experts finally recognized that the isolation method actually caused severe psychological damage rather than genuine rehabilitation. By then, hundreds of prisons across multiple continents had already built their own versions of the flawed system. Philadelphia accidentally exported a deeply broken idea disguised as cutting-edge criminal justice reform. 52. Beneath Philadelphia's busy streets sits a hidden network of forgotten tunnels and sealed-off subway platforms that most residents walking above have no idea exist. Some tunnels once connected active transit lines before plans changed and construction simply stopped halfway through. Urban explorers occasionally sneak down into these abandoned spaces, finding rusted signage and platforms frozen in time for decades. City officials rarely discuss the tunnels publicly, leaving most residents completely unaware of what lies beneath their daily commute. Photos from inside show eerie empty platforms that look ready for trains that will now never actually arrive. Philadelphia quietly carries an entire hidden underground city nobody above ground ever really thinks about. 53. Painter Thomas Eakins lost his teaching position in Philadelphia back in 1886 after a classroom decision that scandalized the entire art school community. He removed a male model's loincloth during a life drawing class held in front of female students studying anatomy. School officials considered the move wildly inappropriate for the era, regardless of Eakins' genuine artistic and educational intentions behind it. Eakins argued fiercely that proper anatomical study required full nudity to teach accurate human form correctly. The school fired him anyway, prioritizing Victorian modesty over what Eakins saw as legitimate artistic education. His dismissal became a famous example of art colliding head-on with rigid 19th-century social norms. 54. Philadelphia's beloved Hoagie sandwich reportedly earned its unusual name from Italian immigrant shipyard workers laboring on Hog Island during World War I. These workers ate hearty, overstuffed sandwiches packed with meat, cheese, and vegetables during their exhausting long shifts, building ships for the war effort. Locals began calling the sandwiches Hoagies after the island itself, before the name eventually evolved into Hoagie over time. Other cities call similar sandwiches Sub-Zeros or Grinders, but Philadelphia stubbornly insisted on keeping its own unique name. Shipyard workers just looking for a filling lunch accidentally created a permanent piece of the city's food identity. The hoagie remains one of Philadelphia's proudest and most fiercely defended culinary traditions today. 55. The giant love sculpture standing downtown was originally intended as nothing more than a temporary loan for America's 1976 bicentennial celebration. Artist Robert Indiana created the colorful piece expecting it to be returned or relocated once the celebration officially wrapped up. Philadelphia residents fell in love with the sculpture almost instantly and simply refused to let the city give it back. Officials quietly decided to keep the piece permanently rather than deal with public outrage over its removal. Decades later, the sculpture became one of the most photographed landmarks in the entire city's skyline. What started as a short-term bicentennial decoration turned into a permanent symbol nobody ever agreed to officially keep. 56. Thomas Jefferson drafted the very first version of the Declaration of Independence while renting a modest room from a Philadelphia bricklayer during the summer of 1776. He worked quietly at a small portable writing desk, crafting language that would eventually define an entire nation's founding principles. The bricklayer's house sat just steps away from where Jefferson would later formally sign the very document he had written. Jefferson reportedly revised his drafts obsessively, working long hours in the summer heat with minimal distractions around him. Few passers-by walking past the modest rented room had any idea history was quietly being written just behind that window. A simple rented bedroom became the secret birthplace of America's most famous founding document. 57. Philadelphia's Fairmount Waterworks opened in 1815 as such an impressive feat of engineering that people actually paid money just to watch it operate. Massive steam-powered pumps moved river water uphill, supplying clean drinking water to residents across the growing city below. Visitors marveled at the mechanical spectacle, treating the facility almost like an amusement park attraction rather than basic city infrastructure. The surrounding grounds became a popular destination for picnics and leisurely strolls among impressed local and visiting families. International travelers reportedly stopped by, specifically to witness the marvel while touring the young United States. Philadelphia somehow turned drinking water infrastructure into one of early America's most surprisingly popular tourist attractions. 58. Al Capone found himself briefly locked up inside a Philadelphia jail cell in 1929, following a relatively minor weapons charge compared to his usual crimes. Rather than losing control of his criminal empire, he simply kept running operations by phone directly from behind bars. Guards reportedly gave him surprising access, allowing calls and even visitors during his short stay inside the facility. Capone treated the brief sentence almost like a working vacation, continuing to manage business as usual from his cell. His stint in Philadelphia became a strange footnote in a criminal career mostly associated with Chicago instead. Even behind bars, Capone proved Philadelphia jail cells apparently came with decent phone service for gangsters. 59. Pennsylvania passed the nation's very first abolition law back in 1780, technically starting the long process of phasing out slavery within the state. The law only freed children born after its passage, while every enslaved adult already living in bondage remained enslaved indefinitely. Families found themselves painfully split between freeborn children and parents who stayed legally enslaved for the rest of their lives. Critics at the time, and modern historians alike, point out how slowly and incompletely the supposedly groundbreaking law actually worked. Some enslaved individuals waited decades watching younger relatives gain freedom while they themselves never did. Pennsylvania's celebrated first step toward abolition moved forward at a painfully cruel and gradual pace. 60. Philadelphia's Fairmount Park grew so large at one point that it held the title of the biggest landscaped city park anywhere in the entire world. City planners built the sprawling park specifically to protect the Schuylkill River from pollution that threatened the city's entire drinking water supply. Officials worried that unchecked development along the riverbanks would contaminate water flowing directly into Philadelphia homes and businesses. Rather than risk public health, they preserved massive stretches of land, keeping factories and waste far away from the water. Residents gained sprawling green space almost as an accidental bonus tied to a purely practical public health decision. Philadelphia's love for a giant park quietly began as a clever solution to a serious water problem. 61. Philadelphia proudly hosted the very first United States Mint after Congress authorized its creation back in 1792 to produce the young nation's own currency. Workers inside the mint reportedly struck some of the earliest silver dollars using silver donated directly from Martha Washington's own household flatware. The idea that America's very first coins may have started as spoons and utensils sounds almost too strange to believe. Mint workers melted down whatever silver they could gather since the young government lacked reliable, steady supply chains at the time. Collectors today treat these earliest coins as priceless artifacts tied directly to the first president's own household. Philadelphia essentially minted American currency using recycled presidential silverware during the country's earliest desperate years. 62. Philadelphia became a major hub for Underground Railroad activity with abolitionist Quakers running secret safe houses located within mere blocks of Independence Hall itself. Escaped individuals seeking freedom moved quietly through the city, relying on a hidden network of sympathetic residents willing to risk everything. Quaker families hid people in basements, attics, and hidden rooms, while authorities patrolled streets completely unaware of the operation. The irony of freedom seekers hiding steps away from where the Declaration of Independence was signed rarely went unnoticed. Conductors on the Underground Railroad moved people north under constant threat of capture and severe legal punishment. Philadelphia quietly became one of the most dangerous and vital freedom networks in the entire country. 63. Pennsylvania's state capital bounced around dramatically, moving from Philadelphia to Lancaster and eventually settling permanently in Harrisburg over growing political concerns. Lawmakers genuinely feared that unpredictable Philadelphia mobs could storm the legislature and disrupt government business during moments of public outrage. City crowds had a well-earned reputation for rowdy behavior, making officials nervous about keeping government operations too close to the chaos. Lancaster served briefly as a compromise location before Harrisburg finally became the permanent seat of state government. The constant relocating revealed just how seriously officials took Philadelphia's reputation for unruly public disorder. Pennsylvania essentially ran from its own biggest city just to keep lawmakers safe from angry crowds. 64. The Battle of Germantown in 1777 turned into a chaotic disaster, partly because thick fog rolled across the battlefield at the worst possible moment. American troops advancing through the dense fog lost sight of each other and began firing directly at their own confused fellow soldiers. Commanders struggled desperately to identify friend from enemy, while gunfire echoed through the blinding gray haze surrounding them. What should have been a coordinated surprise attack collapsed into confused chaos, costing valuable soldiers and momentum. Washington's forces retreated, having lost the battle largely due to weather, rather than any brilliant British military strategy. Fog alone managed to accomplish what enemy soldiers could not on that disastrous Germantown morning. 65. Washington's army nearly starved to death during the brutal winter of 1777 at Valley Forge, located less than 20 miles from Philadelphia itself. Soldiers wrapped rags around bloody frostbitten feet while surviving on meager rations that barely kept anyone alive through the freezing months. Meanwhile, British forces occupied Philadelphia, comfortably enjoying warm homes and full meals just a short distance away from the suffering camp. The stark contrast between starving Revolutionary soldiers and comfortable British officers highlighted the brutal inequality of that miserable winter. Somehow, Washington's exhausted army survived, emerging in spring, still determined to keep fighting for independence. Valley Forge became a lasting symbol of pure endurance, sitting uncomfortably close to enemy comfort. 66. Robert Morris helped finance the entire American Revolution, using his own personal wealth and connections, earning him the nickname Financier of the Revolution. Despite signing the Declaration of Independence and building Philadelphia into a genuine financial powerhouse, his own fortune eventually collapsed completely. Risky land speculation deals left him buried under massive debts he simply could not repay to furious creditors. Morris ended up thrown into debtor's prison right there in the very city he had helped transform into an economic capital. Visitors could reportedly still meet with him inside the prison, where he continued conducting whatever business remained available. The man who financed a revolution ended his life financially ruined behind Philadelphia's own prison walls. 67. Pennsylvania Dutch communities living near Philadelphia developed distinctive hex signs painted colorfully onto the sides of traditional barns throughout the countryside. Outsiders traveling through the region often mistook these decorative folk art symbols for something far more sinister, like actual witchcraft or occult practice. In reality, the colorful geometric designs mostly represented simple wishes for good luck, protection, and general prosperity for the farm. Families passed down specific patterns through generations, treating the practice as cultural tradition rather than anything remotely magical. Tourists driving past confused barns covered in strange circular symbols spread rumors that only deepened the folklore surrounding them. What began as decorative folk art quietly earned a reputation as rural Pennsylvania witchcraft instead. 68. The Liberty Bell's iconic crack is famously associated with July 4, 1776, despite historians believing the actual damage happened decades later entirely. Most evidence suggests the bell cracked sometime during a test ring or later ceremonial use long after independence had already been declared. Generations of Americans still grew up believing the crack symbolized some dramatic moment tied directly to the declaration itself. Museum records and metallurgical studies tell a much less dramatic story involving ordinary wear and metal fatigue instead. Despite the historical correction, the Romantic myth persists stubbornly in textbooks and tourist retellings across the country. Philadelphia's most famous symbol carries a crack, whose real origin story turned out far less exciting than legend. 69. The Betsy Ross house sat largely forgotten and crumbling for decades before Philadelphia residents rallied together during a major 1930s citywide fundraising campaign. Organizers specifically encouraged school children across the city to donate spare pennies, helping raise money to save the historic home from complete demolition. Thousands of small penny donations gradually added up, demonstrating genuine grassroots public affection for the beloved flag-making legend. The fundraiser successfully preserved the house, transforming it into the popular tourist attraction millions of visitors enjoy touring today. Ironically, the house owes its survival more to determined school children than to any actual historical evidence about Betsy Ross herself. Pennies saved a legend that history books still cannot fully confirm ever happened. 70. Pennsylvania's original 1776 state constitution embraced radical democratic ideas that shocked even other revolutionary leaders throughout the newly forming United States. The document eliminated the position of governor, entirely replacing executive power with only a weak collective council instead of single strong leadership. Critics argued the system created chaotic, indecisive government, lacking any clear authority to actually run the state efficiently. Political infighting and confusion plagued Pennsylvania throughout the following years, as the experimental system struggled under its own idealistic design. Lawmakers eventually gave up entirely, scrapping the radical constitution just 14 years after its original hopeful adoption. Pennsylvania's boldest democratic experiment collapsed under the weight of its own good intentions. 71. Philadelphia's historic Christ Church graveyard serves as the final resting place for Benjamin Franklin, among many other notable early American figures. For generations, visitors have tossed pennies onto Franklin's grave, hoping the small gesture might bring them a little good luck. The tradition ties directly back to Franklin's own famous quote about a penny saved being a penny earned. Tourists peer through the iron fence surrounding the graveyard, tossing coins that pile up steadily across his weathered tombstone. Cemetery caretakers periodically collect the scattered pennies, which often get donated toward maintaining the historic burial ground itself. Franklin's simple saying about saving money, ironically now, inspires visitors to throw money away at his own grave. Philadelphia proved that history is not always noble speeches and perfect monuments. Sometimes it is booing Santa, nailing windows shut, and throwing batteries at your own players. That is what makes this city so unforgettable. So tell me, which one of these 71 facts shocked you the most? Drop it in the comments below. And if you love learning the weirdest, dumbest, most ridiculous history of America, hit subscribe to Dumbest Things so you never miss the next one.